Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Welcome to Bring Out the Talent, a podcast featuring learning and development experts discussing innovative approaches and industry insights. Tune in to hear our talent help develop yours. Now here are your hosts, TTA's CEO and President Maria Melfa and Talent Manager Jocelyn Allen.
Hi, Jocelyn.
Maria, that we were getting down. How are you?
Oh, good. I know we just had a little technical difficulty with your mic, but you were saying that we have a special guest who's here watching us today, and it's my daughter, Charlotte, and we're so excited to have her here. She's doing some part-time support work for us right now, and she's 19. And that's about it because our audience
loves
can't see
our
her.
dance moves. She wasn't embarrassed at all just now.
I already know she's going to get some pictures of that, some videos of that, and put them on TikTok.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. And then here we are on the other side of things, right? Not so funny anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, we're giving her a fast track through a lot of different things. So yes, okay, but let's get started because we have a very cool topic today with a very interesting person. I know I say the word interesting a lot and Jocelyn laughs at me, but we truly have a very unique and interesting guest today. So in this episode of Bring Out the Talent, today we are joined by an extraordinary guest, Chad Foster, a true embodiment of resilience, innovation, and transformation. Chad's story is nothing short of inspiring. Despite losing his eyesight as a young adult, he has achieved remarkable milestones from creating the first CRM software for the visually impaired to becoming the first blind executive to graduate from Harvard Business School, their leadership program, to be precise. And he actually just told us that he is an avid skier and goes down Black Diamond slopes without even being able to see, which is amazing. We'll get into that a little bit later. Chad has worked with some of the world's biggest companies like Google, IBM, and Microsoft, teaching leaders and teams how to turn adversity into advantage. With his powerful overcomer mindset, he is a master at breaking down the anatomy of resilience and helping individuals and organizations thrive in the face of challenges. In this episode, Chad will share his personal journey of transforming obstacles into opportunities, his innovative approach to redefining boundaries, and the practical tools we can all use to navigate change and foster resilience. Whether you are an individual looking to build strength through challenges or a leader seeking to inspire your team, this episode is packed with actionable insights and motivation you won't want to miss. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Chad, your story.
We're excited. We're very excited to have you, Chad. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to having the conversation and getting into it and really helping people learn how to think more resiliently. I think a lot of people talk about the need for resilience, but I don't hear too many people breaking down what it takes to think more resiliently and the mindset shifts that it takes to show up and attach ourselves differently to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And certainly I didn't read about this in a book somewhere. It was my lived human experience. So I'd like to share with everybody what it takes to shift your mindset and not feel stuck in whatever life is throwing at you, whether that's something at work or something in your personal life. How can you show up and be more resilient and achieve greater levels of happiness and success? So look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So your story is incredibly inspiring. So losing your eyesight as a young adult could have been a stopping point for most people, but you turned it into a launching pad. How did you first begin to shift your mindset? How did you embrace this and learn to actually thrive even more than a typical person does in their lifetime?
It was tough. It was really tough. We ask kids all the time what they want to be when they grow up. And it turns out none of them, and I mean zero, say they want to be a blind person. So it was pretty difficult. I was in college. I started losing my eyesight as a young adult, late high school, early college. It started to fade. And at 21 years old, I realized that everything that I'd been hearing about for so long was starting to happen. I couldn't see to read the notes on my page anymore. Couldn't see to complete this really simple college literature assignment. And I realized at that moment that everything that I'd been warned about was getting ready to happen. And life as I had known it was coming to an end. And it was it was terrifying. I was scared. I was angry. I was bitter. I had all these emotions that I was dealing with. And I sat there for a while in that, and it's kind of normal, but I realized that I couldn't just sit and ruminate for the rest of my life. Being 21 years old, I knew chances are I had another 50 or 60 years to live. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself for another 50 or 60 years. That's a lot of sorry. So I had to figure out a new path forward. And I had to really start taking some different decisions in life, learning how to embrace my situation and learning how to think differently about it, and not sitting around feeling sorry for myself for the rest of my life, because none of us get to control the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but every single one of us gets to choose how we respond, and we have to be accountable for our outcomes. So you don't control your circumstances. You're not responsible for your circumstances, but you've got to own your outcomes in life, because as far as I know, we're not getting any do-overs. I'm not getting a do-over. You're not getting a do-over. And so when we look back on our lives, if we're so fortunate to make it to our golden years and you didn't get what you wanted out of your life, how's it going to feel? Even if you can find a legitimate reason to fail or an excuse. And so I decided at that point in my life, I needed to adopt a new philosophy. So that's when I decided that for me, excuses are for losers, which is kind of a hard thing to hear, but I knew I didn't want to live my whole life unhappy and not get what I wanted out of it, knowing that I don't get any do-overs. So I had to do the hard work and hold myself accountable to think differently about my circumstances.
So what made you change? So was it an experience that you had that you were just so down and you knew, okay, I have to do something? Was it somebody you spoke to? What brought that change in you?
I think it was a combination of things. Growing up, my dad always gave me some tough love. My dad was raised in the country on a farm. He was very old school and would always hold me to a higher standard, even though I had problems being able to see well. He didn't expect less of me, so there was a lot of tough love coming from him. Because at the end of the day, I knew that one-on-one, human to human, people care whether or not you can't see. But everybody's got their own problems that they're dealing with. You're dealing with your problems, and your viewers, they're dealing with their problems. And this was my problem. I had to figure out how to deal with it. Nobody was going to come to my rescue and save me from this situation. I knew I had to figure it out for myself. And that helped to shape some of the mental resolve that I needed to navigate the situation. But then I also had an experience when I went to at 20 years old that completely flipped my view on life. And so I walked in to the school with this poor me mentality. I was feeling sorry for myself. None of my friends had to get a guide dog. Everybody else could see just fine. I didn't hang out with people who had disabilities. My friends, we all played ball together growing up, basketball, football, soccer. I wrestled, drove a car, rode a motorcycle, jet skis, all the things that you would do when you're growing up as a young boy. And so here I am, 23 years old, getting my first seeing eye dog. And I went there with this poor victim mentality, and I met people there who completely and profoundly changed my outlook on life. Some of the folks there I met had mental impairments on top of being blind. And some folks were on dialysis because they had diabetes that had robbed them of their eyesight. And then there were these girls there whom I'll never forget. And these girls, they were deaf and blind, but yet they were getting a dog to be independent. Now, for these girls, the only way that we could communicate with them was to talk with an interpreter who would sign into their hands. And that was literally the only way that they could communicate. And despite their unimaginable challenges, these brave souls were getting a dog to travel independently. That experience, those 26 days that I spent there, it's one thing when you meet someone on the street and you hear how rough they have it. We've heard plenty of cliches about when you meet somebody who has it worse off than you, how it changes your perspective. I lived with these people for 26 days. I saw the challenges that they faced firsthand for nearly a month, and it was almost like a light switch went off inside of me. I knew at that moment that happiness was not a feeling, and it was not an emotion. It was a decision that I had to make. It's a decision that you have to make every day when you wake up. You either choose how you're going to look at things, or you allow random circumstances to affect your happiness. You know, all of us have the power to choose. I have the power to choose, and you have the power to choose. I like to think of it now like a game of cards, and that's because no player gets to control the hand that they're dealt, the circumstances that they find themselves in, but every single one of us gets to choose how we play our cards. So we have to make sure we're mindful of that and we're appreciative of the things that we've been given. And that's why at my house for the last 16 years, every night before we go to bed, me, my wife, and kids, we all have to say 3 things that we're thankful for. Because it's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness. And so through the power of choice, you can control your happiness. And I've also found that when you're a happier person, it also leads to more success. And there's a lot of research that underpins that. But it started with that moment at Leader Dogs, and that just profoundly changed the way that I viewed the world. And I came back from Leader Dogs, getting my first seeing eye dog there at the age of 23, forever changed. I approached every situation from that point forward with a completely different attitude and a completely different perspective. And that's when doors started to fly open for me.
Mindset is everything. We say it like all the time, that changing the way that you think about your situation, certain scenarios, even how you receive things in a certain way, always leads to opportunity. Always leads to opportunity, right? Because you're shifting the way that you think about it to say that it is that versus something that's holding you back. Incredibly inspirational, Chad. The fact that like you were even able to come to that, because we're not talking about something that, like you said, you were this everything that you heard was going to happen became to be, and we're forced into this situation, and that's not easy. I honestly don't know that I would come out of it the same way, because you don't know what you would do until you're into it. But your story is so inspirational, because I know a lot of people think that way, like, what would I do? And it's hard to think about that sometimes.
It's tough. I had to sit around at 23 years old, 21 years old, 22, and I was mourning the death of my imagined future self. I made a joke at the beginning. We ask kids all the time what they want to be when they grow up. It's tongue in cheek, but the point is, I never dreamt of growing up and being a blind person.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went blind, everything I'd wanted to be when I grew up, none of it had anything to do with being blind. And so I had to literally mourn the death of all of my hopes and dreams at that point and figure out how I was going to move forward. And I knew that sitting around feeling sorry for myself for the rest of my life wasn't going to work. I thought it would for a little while, and then I realized I couldn't do it. It's too much sorrow, too much pity, too much sadness. There has to be a better way. And at the time, I was asking myself, why me? I think a lot of people ask themselves, why me? Why did this happen to me? And it's a legitimate question to ask, but I think the tone that we have is really important. At first, I had the tone of a victim. Why me? Poor me. This is unfair. But over time, I learned to ask the very same question, but instead of asking it with bitterness in my tone, I asked it with genuine curiosity. And over time, the answers started revealing themselves. I started realizing how I could tell myself better stories about my circumstances, which is pillar number 2 of the anatomy of resilience. Pillar number 1, we've already covered, which is choosing your response. Pillar number 2 is learning how to tell yourself the right stories. Because at the end of your life, you will become your stories. I will become my stories. And so I looked at my situation and started realizing that I had to learn how to tell myself better circumstances about my blindness. I could sit around and tell myself that I went blind because I've got really bad luck, which that could become my story. Or I could choose a better story, a story that says, hey, I went blind maybe because I'm one of the few people on the planet who has the mental strength and toughness to overcome that and use it to help other people. Now, technically, both of those stories can be true, whereas one of those stories paints me as a victim. But the second story, the better story, is a Jedi mind trick that flips my disability into my strength. This happened to me because I have uncommon strength and uncommon determination to overcome it and use it to do some good in the world. And that became my story, and that has since become my reality. So it's really important for us to control the stories that we tell ourselves, because I'll promise you, whether you're talking at work or in your personal life, or regardless of what area of your life you're talking about, you will become your stories.
I love that so much because I can already hear you say those things and you immediately think of an example of doing that and how much of a difference it would make. And I'm very curious about this anatomy of resilience. So you've named
Yeah,
two of the pillars, right? Are there
I
more?
did.
Can you like dive into the rest of it for us?
Sure. Yeah. Visualize your greatness is number 3. You have to visualize how to make sometimes unfavorable circumstances look good. I had to figure out how to make blind look good. It's a little tongue in cheek. I get it. It sounds funny. But think about it. If I could never step back and reimagine how to make blind look good, how could I ever move towards acceptance of those circumstances? I have to figure out how to make things work for me instead of against me. And so at first, for me, I reimagined greatness for my situation and becoming a successful business person. And then once that started coming to life, I started reimagining it yet again and how I could do more good with it and helping other people through keynote speaking, through workshops, through my book that came out a few years back, and really reaching people and connecting with people and helping them learn how to live a happier, more successful, more resilient life. And so it's really important that we visualize greatness in circumstances that we find ourselves in. Sometimes they're not favorable, but we have to take a step back and reimagine a future that's anchored to the reality of the situation, the unchangeable facts, but it's bold enough to inspire us to take action, to do the hard work that it takes to succeed. And that gets us to the 4th pillar, which is where mindset meets action. All the mindset shifts in the world are great, but they really won't do anything without action. Small success breeds action, action creates outcomes, and it's the those outcomes that ultimately get us where we need to be. And so getting comfortable with discomfort is my 4th pillar. You have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because if you're never getting outside of your comfort zone, then you're not growing. It's where life begins, is outside of our comfort zone. And so I've learned that I think in my life, the reason I'm at where I'm at, frankly, is because my life has just been so uncomfortable. The whole thing, everything. Not being able to see well when I was young, bumping into things in dark areas, learning the limitations of my eyesight by multiple trips to the hospital. It's a miracle I'm even here today. I was there so much, we pretty much had our own parking spot at the hospital when I was learning the limitations of my eyesight. That was physically uncomfortable. And then socially, it was uncomfortable when I couldn't drive at night. And then it was uncomfortable when I started going blind in college. And then I got my guide dog, which was great, but it was still socially and emotionally uncomfortable to walk into a university classroom with a 100-pound German Shepherd. And then before you know it, I'm going into job interviews and airports and boardrooms and all these things with a German Shepherd. All that was uncomfortable. And it got to the point where I was so comfortable with the uncomfortable that I would do things just to push myself outside of my comfort zone, like learning how to downhill ski at 38 years old, or taking on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at almost 46 years old, trying to figure out how I was going to defend myself. I really did that in part to spend time with my kids too, because I wanted to be able to have something to share with them. But it was another way for me to continue to get outside of my comfort zone and learn how to defend myself using a martial art like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, the 5th pillar is take advantage of your disadvantages. And the point here is that every perceived disadvantage offers you some advantage if you can just use it in the right context. And there are numerous examples in the corporate world. I've got examples that I talk about in my keynotes for my own situation, my personal situation, going blind. But every disadvantage in your life, if you put it in the right context, can offer you some advantage. And I can cite, if I can find a bunch of examples of how blindness benefits me, I'm sure there are examples in your life of things that you don't think really help you. But if you think about it, you take a step back and really analyze the situation, you can find some context in which they can benefit you too.
Wow. No, there's
so much to digest.
So much there, and it truly is such a inspirational story. So I know one of the things you mentioned, and we mentioned a little bit in the intro, is your downhill skiing. So what motivated you to do that? Is that something you always wanted to do? And how did you start doing that when you don't when you're not able to see.
In the back of my head, I'd always entertained the idea that it would be fun. I never really even considered it after I went blind. And then a friend of mine called me. He was in Snowmass, Aspen, Colorado. And he said, "Hey, I'm out here with a business partner and they've got adaptive ski out here and they're telling me they can get you down the mountain. What do you think about coming out here next year?" I said, "It just doesn't sound safe. I just don't know. Putting on a pair of skis, blind guy going down a mountain, it just doesn't sound like a recipe for success." So I started doing some research and investigating it and found out that they actually have a system for getting a blind guy down a mountain. It involves Bluetooth communication gear in the helmet, microphone, earpiece, all those things. And then a ski pro skis behind me and tells me whether to go left or whether to go right and how hard to turn and all those things. And so I decided, you know what, let's give it a try. So I started at 38 years old, learning how to do that. And at first, obviously, there was a lot of falling because I couldn't ski at all. I didn't know how to ski, couldn't control where I was going, couldn't see where I was going. It's not a great combination, not being able to see where you're going and not being able to control where you're going. So when they called a left turn, I may or may not have been able to execute it. More often than not, it was a no at first. But then over time, I got so good at it that I worked up to where I could execute the turns without any problem and handle different terrain, whether that's double fall lines or steeper pitch, or sometimes we'll do moguls, and just really watching out for all the things that we have. So learning that if I, with the right technique, I can handle the different terrain that's out there, but we figured a system out to actually bring it to life. And so it consists of good communication and obviously having good technique, but then also a really good helmet. If there's one thing you really need as a blind skier, it's a good helmet.
Yes. I mean, everything about that, even the communication part. I mean, it's just another incredible story.
I just love how, like, and you absolutely exemplify this, Chad, but I love when we have guests like this who have such incredible, valuable experiences and knowledge, but then can relate it so humanly back to us all, right? Because there are some people who will understand exactly what you are experiencing, right? And then there are others who are like, I understand this resilience and this path that you're taking me on to understand this more is inspiring. But the fact that you can say something so simple that says, oh, that's my aha moment as this person. That's why I love the show and what we do, because it making those connections and communicating in a particular way makes a difference.
It's all about reaching people where they are. Yeah.
Do you work with athletes?
Yeah, I've done some work with athletes. I've done some coaching. Obviously, I got certified as a leadership coach too. Did some of that. I have less time for that nowadays because my schedule is so packed with speaking engagements right now. I've done 8 engagements in the last 2 weeks. I've got, I don't know, 14 in the next month or so. And so it's just, it's a little crazy. My travel schedule looks a little unmanageable from time to time, but I feel privileged to be able to do work that makes a difference in people's lives. It helps people learn how to live a more meaningful, purpose-driven, happier and successful life, but at the same time helps them contribute to organizational performance. And at the same time, it gives new meaning to what I've been through. I get to do work that flips my struggle into a gift. Now I know that for me, blindness was a beautiful gift that came disguised in some really ugly wrapping paper. And so I wonder for your listeners right now, like, what gifts are right in front of you that you've not even contemplated? Some of the world's most precious gifts come disguised in ugly wrapping paper. But if you could just pause and open your heart and your mind to receive it and find out what good can come out of it and how you can use it in service of other people, that's where the healing and the real nourishment comes in. And in some bizarre sort of way, the work that I do makes going blind worth it. And I don't say that lightly. Bear in mind, I've never seen my wife. I will never lay my eyes on my children. I don't make that statement lightly. But the work that I do gives new meaning and new value, because now I speak to, I don't know, I'm in front of maybe 50,000 people every year speaking. I get to help those people in a way that would otherwise not be possible. And so it's hard to put into words when you can find meaning in your life's greatest struggle. And it's not something that I pioneered. I'm not going to sit here and claim credit for the idea. Viktor Frankl talks about it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, finding meaning in the suffering when he was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp back in the war with Germany. He founded logotherapy, which is all about finding meaning in the suffering. And then I learned this as well at a professional level when I studied at Harvard Business School. And Professor Bill George, he's a former chairman and CEO of Medtronic. He's now an executive fellow there at Harvard Business School. He teaches his True North leadership framework, which really is about taking crucibles in your life, personal experiences that were hard, difficult, and traumatic, and finding a way to transform those to serving other people, either professionally or through volunteer efforts. And that's actually what put me on the path that I'm on today. And that's why I wrote the book and got into keynote speaking, because now I'm able to help people in a way that allows their companies to perform at a higher level. It allows them to get more meaning and purpose out of their life. It helps me emotionally, and I get to send my kids to school at the same time. So I feel like I've hit the lottery, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much here in your background and all the things that you're telling us. I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about too is you created the first CRM software for the visually impaired. So is that something that you are still working on now?
No, I'm not in that world anymore. I did that for a while. My first job out of college was with Anderson Consulting, now known as Accenture, so a tech
Yes.
consulting firm. And I learned how to write code while I was there. Obviously, part of that was my job, but also I needed to be able to do that just to be able to do my job, because my software that I use, my screen reading software, didn't work with everything out of the box. And so when I needed to use an enterprise application, it wouldn't always work. So I had to teach myself how to write code, to engineer my own software just to be able to do my job. I ended up starting a business where I did that for other people. Next thing you know, I had somebody from Accenture contact me and told me that they had a customer who could not do his job because of one of the CRM systems that they'd had. It didn't work with the screen reading technology. So I sat down and wrote some code and built a software solution so that these two programs could talk to one another. And later on, I found out that Oracle, the owner of that application, had been going around telling everybody that it was impossible, that it could not be done, but I'd already done it. So I got on the phone with the Oracle technical account manager, got my client on the phone, the manufacturer of the screen reader, and they said, "We don't think it's possible." And my customer said, "Actually, it is. He did it for us about a year ago, and we've been using it." So next thing, Oracle's sending me referral business for me to do that for them. And I did also get called to testify in a court case about the possibility of doing that. But at the time, I was the only person in the world who knew how to build a bridge between those two systems. And I did that professionally for a while. I just don't really have the bandwidth to do it now. I've got so many things going on between all the other endeavors that I'm in. But I always find it fun and rewarding to help people out by building those bridges for those systems and really unlocking job opportunities for millions of people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to provide for their families.
Truly amazing. And I know you've done a lot of work with companies like Google and Microsoft. So that's on the keynote speaking areas?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get called, maybe it's not the right term, but people inquire. Sometimes it's a phone call. Most of the time it's a submission on my website. People will inquire. They either hear about me through word of mouth, referral, an ad, they find me in a search result, something like that. But yeah, I'll do probably 75 events this year. Did about 50 or 60 last year, and it's continued to really multiply exponentially. I have a first world problem in terms of keeping up with all the people who want to have me speak. So I feel very fortunate to be able to do that and really empower people, whether they're at whatever organization. All these organizations are going through things right now. They're finding it's difficult to attract and retain the right people. People are experiencing burnout and having to do more with less. We've got evolving regulations, a new presidential administration, which is changing things, and people are trying to figure out how to adopt emerging technology like AI in a way that is good for their business. It helps them drive top line growth and or efficiency in the business, while at the same time protecting whether it's a healthcare system, they're looking to protect patient safety and security and all these different things that they have to consider and be successful with it. So I get to go around helping people understand how to apply resilient thinking and the anatomy of resilience to those situations so that they can continue to expand their business and get the most out of what it is that they're doing while accommodating all the things that are swirling around us. We went from COVID to remote work and hybrid work arrangements and building connection in a remote work environment. And now things just continue to pivot. And change is not going to stop. It's only getting faster. It seems like the pace of change is accelerating faster and faster and faster. That's not going to change. I've been in tech my whole career. It's never been faster in my life than it is right now. And with the way AI is taking shape, I think it's only going to continue to accelerate. So the most important skill any of us can build isn't really math or isn't any of these other things that we think of when we think of skills, whether it's Microsoft Office or modeling or whatever. I think really the most important skill we can build is resilience, because we will all have to adapt and reinvent ourselves multiple times in the current environment that we're living in right now. Things are just moving too quickly.
I could not agree with you more. I love what you said too, that change is a constant, right? And it sounds backwards when you say that the only thing you can count on is always not being able to count on things, right? And I love that you said that the problem, not even the problem, it's not really about the change, it's about the quickness of it. And yes, there are some changes that we've seen kind of going through recently. Like you said, there's always systematic changes. We encountered COVID, et cetera, et cetera. But how quick, like, I feel like COVID just happened. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of far, like, I don't want to say far out of it. I don't want to speak incorrectly, but we are beyond it at this point where it's kind of like a functioning part of our everyday lives, and we stay safe and all that kind of stuff. But how quickly have 87,000 other things changed within that climate since then? It's testing everything about people. And I think whether it's personally or professionally, being prepared for the bounce back is the absolute most important skill that you can have. So I'm very glad that you stated it that way, because again, it just makes connections to people who aren't necessarily thinking specifically to the way that you're addressing it, but as a broad issue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can get down with that. That makes sense, right?
It's coming. And the good news is a lot of people think resilience is some inherited trait that some of us have and some of us don't. It's not. It can be learned. And it's the pillars that I talk about, and there are ways to implement that. And I do that in the keynote and the workshops and things, and help people understand how to apply it to certain situations. I actually just finished shooting a masterclass in a studio as well to help take people through the anatomy of resilience and how they can apply it. It's about a 3 or 4 hour masterclass with content, but it is a skill. It can be learned. You don't have to either be born with it or not. Certainly some people may have a tendency for it, but certain people have a tendency to be good at different things. Some people just are born with the innate ability to communicate. Some people are born with the innate ability to be creative. Some people are born with the innate ability to be good at math. That doesn't mean that other people can't learn. We can all learn different skills. And good news for everybody is that resilience is a skill that can be learned, so that you don't have to stay fixed in the environment that you're in. You can have that growth mindset. You can learn how to better empower yourself with that growth mindset so that you can adapt and you can thrive regardless of what's going on around you.
So one of the topics that we get involved with a lot is change management, and that can have implications in many different areas, whether it's a large system rollout, whether it's hiring new people, onboarding people, offboarding people. So when these organizations are calling you for some of these keynote speaking sessions, are these the areas that they want to address when they're experiencing a lot of change?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a huge need, because obviously my story is all about change. Going blind and at 21 years old, that's a pretty significant amount of change, and figuring out how you're going to reinvent yourself to that new world and adapt and not feel stuck and not feel weighted down by the gravity of the situation, and moving forward, not only productively, but with meaning and with purpose, and doing it with real fulfillment coming out of your life, and lightness and joy and all those things. And that's what all of us really want out of our lives, right? We all want to live a happier, more successful, purpose-driven life. And I'm very fortunate in that I've crack the code on that. And I want to be able to share that with people so that they can also live their best life. It's really important.
Do they hire you when they're going through any specific thing, or is it just in general to help with change management? Like, because I know these companies. Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
I've had both. I've had people hire me as a new system is going live, like a major once in a generation type system is going live. I've had people, whether it's the timing, I don't know how coincidental it was or wasn't, but during a merger or acquisition, divestiture, really helping people understand how to think about those types of situations. But then sales kickoffs, leadership summits, those sorts of things. It's very common for me to come in and either open or close those for people and help them understand how they can think about whether it's a major planned change that you would have a really significant program management of change management anchored to, or whether it's just the general change that's going on inside of every business right now, the things that I've talked about, the challenges that they're all facing and how they can navigate those more productively. So I've done a little bit of all the above.
So when did you write your book?
Came out in 2021. February of 2021 was when it came out. Blind Ambition, something I've been planning to do for quite some time, but actually got it out on shelves. HarperCollins Leadership is the publisher, but it came out in February of 2021.
Another great accomplishment.
Yeah, you have a ton of them, Chad. Like I am because I'm very inspired by you. Your story is phenomenal, and it's there's so much feeling tied to it too, for a number of different reasons.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate everything that you've brought to the table to overcome what you were up against. Because like I said, like you think about it so simply, I don't know that I could do the same. And it's a beautiful thing that you've done. And I know that with a lot of your keynotes, what you focus on is like emphasizing the call to action, right? Like, here's my story, here's what we're doing, but like, here's what you can do about it.
Yes.
Can you give us some of the tools or your go-to kind of actions / techniques that you find are really helping people drive the transformation of resilience and that mindset shift? Like what works the best when you're speaking in these engagements?
Well, I like to customize my message. So I've got a core message that I deliver. Obviously, I've got lots of stories. I'll look at how much time do I have to talk. I'll figure out based on the context for the event, which stories are the right stories to tell. But then I'll customize it for the audience. I'll understand what are the top 3 to 5 challenges that the audience is facing. And then I'll look at what's the theme of the event, what's the purpose of the organization, what bigger picture thing are they trying to solve. And I'll weave those things into my keynote. And so I'll start off and make sure they understand that I understand the challenges that they're facing. I'll talk about those challenges. I'll link the anatomy of resilience back to their why, sort of what the mission of the organization, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then throughout the talk, I'll surgically tailor it to fit those challenges and making sure that they understand they have to be accountable for X, Y, and Z, depending on the organization. They have to own certain things in their life and in their work. I'll make sure that they understand how each pillar that I talk about, the 5 pillars of resilience we went over a little while ago, but link that back to something specific in their work, a challenge that they're facing, so that they don't have to wonder, well, how do I apply this to me? That's great for you, Chad, but what about me? Well, I do that for them so that they don't have to sit there and wonder, how does this apply to my work? So I'll link each of those pillars back to a challenge that they're facing and then tie it all up at the end by reminding them at the very end of how their work contributes to something bigger than themselves, because I feel like that doesn't receive enough airtime. I think a lot of folks tend to get caught up on performance and numbers and compensation, and all those things are great. We need them, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have the lasting power of the meaning behind the work. Anybody who's ever had a raise knows you get a raise and in 3 months you've kind of forgotten about it. Maybe you adjust your lifestyle, maybe you don't. You save more money, you spend more money, whatever. But in 3 to 6 months, you don't really think about it anymore. And the same's true for a promotion or any of those other things. And so what motivates you? What has more lasting power than the transactional nature of compensation or promotions? It's why we do the work that we do. And so I have a story that I tell about what got me into speaking that really moves people to think differently about why they're doing the work that they're doing and making sure that they're connected to the purpose of the organization and how what they do contributes to that purpose, which becomes very durable in terms of motivation and getting people really connected to getting up out of bed every day and wanting to run into work and do the hard things that it takes to be successful. It's not for them per se. It's moving outside of themselves, moving beyond themselves in service of other people. Typically it's their clients or whomever, but it's all about the mission of the organization.
Right on. Absolutely everything you said. So do you do small workshops as well? Is it more large keynote speaking engagements?
I've done both. I'd say more often than not, it's large keynotes, but I don't do workshops unless I've done the keynote because otherwise I'm just a guy with a cool pair of sunglasses and a cute dog. So I've got to tell my story before you're really going to listen to me. But after I tell my story on stage through a keynote, then I've got your heart and I've got your mind. You're going to listen to me because you understand the road that I've walked, and that gives me a lot more influence over the workshop. So I simply won't do a workshop without the keynote first because of that. Otherwise, it won't be as effective.
It's amazing the stories you hear of the people that are the most successful or the most happy always have had a lot of adversity in their lives. I always am very fascinated. I love football. I watch a lot of football, and I love looking at some of the stories of these football players who were told no a million times or just grew up in such a horrible situation. And it's just amazing how resilient they are. So I always say to myself, like when I look and read management books or leadership books, and I definitely have to pick up your book, I get more inspired by people that have gone through the adversity because I don't know. I mean, I guess you could relate more, but it just seems like it's coming from a deeper point of view, and it's not just like how to in 10 steps because that doesn't connect you to the motivation to do it.
No, it takes the emotional connection is crucial.
Yes.
And that's why I start off my keynote. I have to connect with people at a vulnerable emotional level. And so I do that, but I also realize if I'm too vulnerable for too long, people start to feel sorry for me, or they would. So I don't do that either. So I'll take you on the journey. I don't spend too much time there, but I need to spend some time there. Otherwise, you're going to think I'm not relatable because it wasn't hard. And so it was hard. And I need to tell you about how hard it was. But on stage, if you spend too much time there, then people start to feel sorry for you. And that's the last thing I want. I don't want people walking out of my session thinking, thank God I'm not that guy. I want them to walk out of my session saying, man, I wish I was more like that guy. That's what I want them to say. Right. So I put a lot of thought into how much time I spend in the hole is how I refer to it. And I have to spend some time in the hole to build connection, but not too much because I don't want people feeling that pity.
I love your message, Chad. I love your message.
Yes.
Thank you.
Final thoughts. What is one step somebody who is listening to you right now can take, regardless of like who they are, what position they're in, who they manage, like whatever? What's step one? What do you recommend doing to start making this change within yourself towards a more resilient mindset?
The foundation would be gratitude. So I would say every night, write down 3 things that you're thankful for. Shift your mindset. Stop focusing on the things that you don't have. Start focusing on the things that you do have. Build habit and muscle memory to focus on the things that we all naturally take for granted as human beings and not the things that unfortunately many of us take for granted. I took my eyesight for granted until I could not. So it's really important to have that gratitude as the foundation.
Cheers to that, Chad. Cheers to that. I love your story. I love this message. And for everybody listening, like, you too can overcome. Mindset is important, and do yourself a favor. Think better. Think better.
Absolutely. There's no way I could have imagined I'd be where I'm at. When I was going through that, it was a bad spot. And now here I am, 25 years removed from it, There's no way I could have ever contemplated I'd be where I'm at. It's amazing what you can do if you shift your mindset, adjust your attitude, do the hard work with the right attitude and the right stories that you're telling yourself, and you'll find that doors will fly open for you. People will want to help you because you've got a good attitude, you're doing the hard work, but it takes courage, and courage is not experiencing fear. But a lot of people think courage is when fear is not present. That's completely untrue. Courage is stepping through fear, doing the things that are scary, even though they're scary. And now I'm kind of lost my mind a little bit. I do things that are scary because they're scary, because I don't want them controlling me. That's when I did my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu combat sports tournament. That's the reason I did it, because I didn't want it to scare me. So I went and competed so that fear wouldn't live rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. I wanted to go do it and face the fear, because I knew deep down inside of me that growth is on the other side of that fear.
Outstanding.
What was harder for you, the jiu-jitsu or skiing?
Jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
How do you do that without being able to see? Like
it's all hands-on. It's entirely hands-on. So it's grappling, it's chokeholds and joint locks. There's no striking. So I get a lot of information through the body. It tells me what's going on.
So fascinating. It is.
You said your kids do it as well?
Yeah.
That's
I've got
great.
both kids in it. Yeah,
That's
16-year-old
awesome.
daughter. She just got her blue belt in the adult
Heck
level.
yeah.
Pretty excited about that. I was more proud of her
Excellent.
getting hers than I was for any of mine. And our son is 8, and he's also training too.
That's excellent.
So cool.
Great
So cool.
skill to have. Well, we're having such a great conversation with Chad. He lost track of time, and we did too. So he's actually on another speaking engagement right now. So thank you, Chad. I know you'll be listening to this. What an incredible story you have, and truly inspirational.
Agreed. And not only that, I know you all are looking forward to the TTA 10. It would have been a killer one. And we still celebrated Chad. So David, do you want to go ahead and run that back so we have it for Chad and the listeners?
Well, I know Chad's going to listen to this, so it all works out. And listening to his story, I was so inspired that I wondered whether we could put together a major motion picture about Chad's life. And so if we did, I think the trailer would sound something like this.
Coming to a theater near you. The inspiring true story.
I didn't lose my vision. I found my purpose. So, Doc, are you going to give me the news or what?
I'm sorry, Chad. You're going blind.
Don't be sorry, Doc. You say I won't be able to see. I say I see opportunity. I had a choice. Let my blindness define me or rewrite the definition of success.
Welcome to Harvard University. You're the first blind executive to ever graduate from this program.
Won't be the last. And by the way, I'm just getting warmed up.
Chad, many have tried to create CRM software for the visually impaired. We here at Oracle just don't see how it can be done.
Oh man, once again, the irony. I see what you don't. Well, get ready for an eye-opening experience.
Wow. The son of a bitch actually did it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chad Foster.
Blindness didn't steal my vision. It made it clearer than ever.
Based on the incredible true story. This summer, witness the unstoppable power of resilience. Blind Vision, the Chad Foster story. Starring Vin Diesel as Chad Foster. Coming soon.
And there you go.
That is
David.
awesome. You know what? This could be a movie.
It really
I think this is
Yeah.
going to inspire him.
Sure.
We have no idea if he's thinking of a movie, but Chad, this should inspire you to do a movie.
Absolutely.
Nothing can stop you.
Not at all. So good. Thank you for everything. I am officially shifting my mindset. For more information and inspiration on how you can be more resilient, visit us at thetrainingassociates.com. We'll see you later.